The Waves of Tech is the down-to-earth tech podcast for you, your family, and your friends. We remove all the complicated, drawn-out explanations of technology and simply talk about how technology is influencing every element of our lives, from social media and the cloud to tweeting and mobile communication. We talk tech in a different way. So plug in your devices and listen as we get ready to ride the waves of tech.
On episode 418 of The Waves of Tech, Verizon 5G goes live, the Fed sue California over net neutrality, and Project xCloud from Microsoft. The Waves of Tech is powered by modernlife.network, modern issues, modern discussions. Well, Steve, welcome back. We took a 2-week hiatus as we were planning / recovering from International Podcast Day as we are the organizers, planners, and founders of that event. So welcome back to the podcast. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing fine. I think I would change your statement just a little bit, which would be planning and still recovering.
That's a key word to throw in there.
It really is. It was a great event over last weekend, and I really encourage everybody to go to internationalpodcastday.com. I mean, the conversation doesn't stop, once the event's over, Dave, and go to our YouTube channel where we're starting to populate all the sessions that we had from all over the world. And my phone is ringing and it should have been off. So I've now silenced that. And here we go to continue. That's just tech and live podcasting, Dave. The other thing is, we also hosted the 13th Annual Podcast Awards, Dave. And for those that regularly listen to this show, we were once again a finalist. Didn't win, but we were a finalist. And that's cool. That's great. That's awesome. And I just want to thank everybody that has supported this show throughout the years, to including this year's Podcast Awards.
Absolutely. It's just such a great event that goes on. And, we've always said International Podcast Day, it is our day as a podcast and a podcast community to come together to celebrate the media that we love and just to continue to share the word. And you're right, it doesn't stop just on that day. We continue to share the power of podcasts. We continue to start the conversation with people that don't listen to or don't know about podcasts. And so it's just a great event. I'm always pleased, Steve, every year to do it with you. We make a great team as far as the planning and organizing and making connections and creating a bunch of resources for podcasters out there and really touching, the podcast listener as well. We reach out year in and year out to try and get them involved more and more. So Steve, I did want to put a quick caveat in here. I am currently hanging out in a hotel room in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, where my wife is actually at a work conference with a couple colleagues, so I get to enjoy a week's worth of freedom and downtime in the City of Lights. So if there are any potential issues with the broadcast or the audio quality is because I'm actually running, Steve, off my personal hotspot off of my iPhone. So far, so good, but just a little caveat. So I'm in Vegas and you're still working. So how about that?
Can I be honest? It sucks because I guess I may go into it a little bit as to why. But hey, we all got to get away for a little while, Dave. But you know what? Even though you're remote, you're still podcasting with us. So that's one of the great things about the technology of today. And some of the things that we're going to get into later about how those technologies impacts our lives.
Absolutely. Let's dive right into it, Steve. Verizon 5G home internet service is now live in 4 U.S. cities. And Verizon announced it was working to bring 5G home internet service to a few cities last November. And of course, they've lived up to that promise. They launched their service about a week ago, October 1st, and there are installations starting for residents in the likes of Sacramento, California, Los Angeles, Indianapolis, and Houston. And it is reported that customers will be able to access typical Wi-Fi speeds around 300 Mbps and, of course, peak speeds at 1 gigabyte per second. And, of course, as part of the rollout, if you didn't hear, Verizon is offering 3 months of its 5G home service for free, which then will cost you $50 a month for existing Verizon customers, $70 a month for non-Verizon customers. And just a little ice on top of the cake, Steve, the company is also offering a free Chromecast and an Apple TV 4K and 3 months of YouTube TV. So the service comes with installation included, and of course, the first access to 5G mobile devices as they become available in their areas. And so, Steve, this is really interesting. We've talked about 5G a number of times on this podcast. 5G is really built on a couple things we'll talk about later, but it's built on the whole idea of mobile commuting, mobile streaming, and all the developments associated with commercial networking, with smartphone development. It's going to be interesting how this plays out. It's going to be interesting how this rolls out across the United States. And it's here, Steve. They promised it. They said 5G is going to be here. And, in the meantime, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint have been building out their own networks to support mobile 5G. And of course, hardware makers are and have been developing 5G smartphones to be compatible with this network. So it's really interesting to see that 5G is here. It's been talked about for a while, and Verizon came through with their promise, and it's out in 40 U.S. cities right now. Unfortunately, not one that we live in, but, eventually, perhaps, maybe it comes to my town, maybe it comes to your town. But it's really cool news for a lot of the home service providers and the home service residents of these cities.
It's interesting where the wireless industry is really going. When we look back in time, when I used to own a internet service provider, we were all modem based at that time, and we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of banked modems that people would call into from their landlines in their homes. And then when we started migrating over to cable networks or DSL and some of these things. And it's not going to be too much further into the future where all 100% of our internet-based utility is based on Wi-Fi. The 5G really brings it into a better perspective of utilization. The backbone of, this is just too slow, and not 5G. I think some of the real benefits of this as we continue to roll and expand the 5G networks is certainly the possibilities, well, I'm sure it'll happen, of getting more rural and distant areas that currently cannot have broadband because of the limitations of physical cable, etc., will now have the ability to get high-speed internet once these 5G networks are built out, and that people can then have home access. As far as the price, pretty competitive, I would say, in comparison to a typical monthly home, let's say, cable installation. When we look at, I think, the baseline of probably what that speed is, here's some dangling carrots for you, too, if you want to get a Chromecast or an Apple TV. I think it's great. And, we're going to see here pretty soon what the other networks are going to do. I think primarily AT&T, certainly next, and then followed up by T-Mobile. I'm not sure my phone needs to really run that fast, Dave. I mean, to me, it does make a difference. I'm fine with just 4G LTE. But when it comes to potential of home connectivity, I think there's a real Benny there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a lot of good points, Steve, specifically when you talk about the rural areas. I do live in an area of Central California that has a vast landscape, where everything from where you're at within the mountainous areas to the deserts to everything in between. And we live in a valley that has a lot of rural population with a lot of rural like school districts and housing and stuff. And, maybe not quite, maybe there's populations in some of the northern states of the United States that have a very limited access. I think when you're talking about what 5G can do as far as home internet service, you want to look at that. Yes, it makes sense that right now Verizon is looking at Sacramento, Los Angeles, Indianapolis, Houston, high metropolis areas. They want to see how their 5G service stacks up, how it's all going to play out. It makes sense to be in those. Also, there's some tech heavy hitters in there. Houston and Los Angeles have a lot of startups, a lot of business and commercial and enterprise that happens in those areas. And don't take anything away from Sacramento and Indianapolis, just thriving as much as they can. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens with 5G in those rural areas. It would be nice to have, sustainable, long-term, dependable, reliable internet service for them. Because, I'm done seeing the cheesy commercials on, online and on TV about how you can get this access in this area. Let's put a good product out there like Verizon doing. Like you said, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, they're going to get around to it as well. It happened to be Verizon was the first to claim that title by launching their 5G home network. And they've been ahead of the game. And we can see the writing on the wall, Steve, with what Verizon has been doing with their acquisitions years upon years here. So it really, like you said, the price point's good. The access is looking good. I would be more wanting 5G, as I said, for my home internet service, not so much on my mobile. But perhaps that will change, as a lot more gaming, a lot more video consumption, all that is still pushed to mobile. This 5G wireless concept will eventually come into play. So yeah, really cool news, I think, coming from Verizon.
Yeah, the wireless portion of this is kind of interesting. When I first started out and we were on an edge network, pretty much worthless. Then we went to 3G. It was all right. But we really didn't start getting our connectivity speeds until 4G LTE was available, and now certainly 5G. I guess, number one, let's see what happens with this in relationship also to net neutrality. Right now, it's new. They're throwing out all these benefits, et cetera, but what's really going to be the staple when it's all done and said in terms of costing and throttling and all these kind of things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But something else, Dave, I think we should invite Andy Kosowski back onto the show, who is actually in the industry, and really get his insight of what he seems to believe and think about 5G coming down.
Yeah, I'd love to hear his opinions on what's going on in the space. And we'd love to bring that, of course, to this podcast and share. So any final words on 5G, Steve, before we move on to what Microsoft is doing?
Well, it's going to be hard for me to analyze because it'll probably be 2040 before I get it where I live. But for those that have it in their area, I'd love to hear from you and see what you think about it.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's going to be limited rollout. I don't think Verizon wants to mess this up in any respect. They have a good thing going for them right now. So I think they're being very strategic and just rolling out their service in a few areas and trying to figure out from there where to go, who to support, and where to provide their services. So we'll have to also keep track, Steve, of those benefits. The little bennies on the side. Are those getting better? Are they getting worse? Or, that may tell us something as well. Well, Steve, Microsoft has entered into the live video game streaming fray. And as of this Monday, the company revealed details about what they're calling Project xCloud. And this is a service that will let you stream Xbox One games to computers, phones, and tablets. And their VP of Cloud Gaming had said in a post that, quote, "Our vision for the evolution of gaming is similar to that of music and movies. Entertainment should always be available on demand and accessible from every screen," end quote. Steve, I find this to be very interesting because you and I aren't really into the gaming industry per se. We follow it a little bit here on the podcast. We share some of the cool things that may come down the pike or may influence, gamers or in the gaming industry. But this is really interesting because for a number of years, the gaming industry has always said, you buy a game, you play on this device. You buy a game, you play on this device. There is no real sharing, right? You can't take your Xbox game that you bought and you own as far as a disc, or if you download it, you can't play that on your phone. You can't play it on someone else's computer. It's always been very stationary. It's essentially set. Where you buy it is where you play it. And this is kind of flipping that concept on its head and saying, you know what, if you buy a game across the Microsoft platform of Xbox, you will eventually be able to utilize that on your tablet, on your phone. And so Microsoft is actually currently testing out Project xCloud on mobile devices. And what they're doing, Steve, is they're actually pairing an Xbox wireless controller over Bluetooth to your mobile device. And so it's going to be really interesting. They can use that. Microsoft is also going to have really like this touch interplay overlay on top of the gaming. So if you don't want to use a controller, you can have sort of that game specific touch and feel to it as well. A lot of public trials are set to begin here in 2019. And we'll actually include a link here because the YouTube video that they have Microsoft put together is really cool. Tells a little bit of the story about how they're really trying to revolutionize. They're trying to change the way people think about gaming. Everybody wants their Netflix, for example, to be what? On their computer, on their phone, on their set-top boxes, and on their TVs at home. Netflix doesn't tell us where and how to consume it. They give us their product and say, go have fun, share, bring it to your friend's house, watch it during work, watch it on your lunch break, whatever. Xbox and Microsoft are trying to do that same thing. You've bought our product. We want our product to be where you are using it, not just simply at your home, at your friend's house, wherever. You want to use this, globally, essentially. And I think this is a really good push. It's other gaming streaming services have been mentioned, a number of times on our show here, but they're really getting into the fray now. They're now taking their gaming company and their cloud platform and their Azure systems where they have 54 regions, and they're really rolling this out, and they want to do it right. We know Microsoft has a history, Steve, of rolling things out way too soon and then falling flat on their faces. You can't get this wrong with Project xCloud. You can't get it wrong with the gaming industry because it's hard to rebound from that. It's a dedicated force of players and gamers out there that won't settle for anything but the best. And so I think this is really cool that Microsoft is really jumping in head first and really putting their data centers to good use, right? And providing this game streaming service that's going to let you play any of your games on your phone wherever you want. And I think that's quite a game changer in this space.
I'm at a real disadvantage on this topic because I think the last time I ever played any kind of a game was probably when you were a lot younger, Dave, and we played, Techno Super Bowl on a whatever it was. I don't know. I just don't game. But I will say this, that certainly that industry, because of certain things like Twitch and some things like that, has really exploded to be not just a personal in your bedroom or living room kind of thing, to certainly a worldwide adventure for gamers to watch gaming or stream your gaming or whatever the case may be. And certainly this was definitely within Microsoft's best interest to develop and expand the envelopes of the gaming to be, just kind of the way things are. And, for gamers, it's a great thing. For Microsoft, it's a great thing. So overall, certainly I would be, if I was a gamer, tickled pink with something like this when it comes to being a steadfast platform that is not of third party, but from the manufacturer themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the big thing that's going to be a bit of a worry that Microsoft is definitely, there's a hill that has to be climbed, is that latency period when it comes to smooth game streaming. It has to be smooth, it has to be accurate, it has to be current, because anytime you get any lull or any sort of like buffering or latency when it comes to gaming, that's going to impact the overall product. That's going to impact the user's experience. Of course, Microsoft has come out and promised that they're working on all fronts to make sure there's that it's a slick user experience. They're trying to figure out ways, and including new ways of carrying out video encoding, ways of carrying out video decoding at the same time. And of course, we have to realize, Steve, as we just talked about, kind of realizing with 5G, is that Microsoft admits that, what they're doing here with Project xCloud, they're going to be pushing the edge of what's possible even with 5G. When it comes to mobile broadband, 5G, has still some way to go, as we mentioned. But them coupling that with what Verizon's doing and what AT&T and T-Mobile will be doing in the future, we do understand that, yeah, Microsoft is going to have some concerns about latency, about smooth game streaming. But we also have to, it's just not dependent on Microsoft technology, Microsoft's networks, or their data center. It's going to have a lot to do with the user's connectivity and the user's connection, right? You're not going to have a perfect 100% streaming, functionality, simply because Microsoft has put everything together. We know that our personal connections mean a lot. So I think, Steve, kind of closing this out, is Project xCloud, it's an exciting glimpse of what the future of what they're calling unshackled gaming may look like. You're no longer going to be bound to just playing games in your room or at your friend's house or wherever. You're going to be able to take your Microsoft Xbox gaming's systems and your games you own and play them across your tablets, across consoles, across PCs, across the mobile networks. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's a big change, both in concept, but also change in where and how we are consuming our data. And sometimes when we just think of, consumption, we always talk about like, Netflix, or we talking about social media. It's not always about that. There's a lot more to how people want to use their technology. When it comes to gaming, they want it in their pocket. They want to be able to take it and be able to pause their game, save their game, and play wherever they want, whenever they want.
As long as you can still play tic-tac-toe online, I'm good.
Oh, that's like the game of all games, right?
It's the only one I know.
Well, Steve, news came down last week, sometime around the 1st of October, that the United States federal government is set to sue the California governor and the California legislature over a net neutrality law that Governor Jerry Brown here in the state of California laid out and signed. And essentially what the U.S. Justice Department did is they filed suit after, again, Jerry Brown signed legislation to restore open internet protections, also known as we know it, net neutrality in the states. Of course, after the administration, the current FCC, repealed the rules, Steve, it's almost been a year, I think, December 2017. And of course, this is just another clash that's going on between the federal government and the state of California. There always seems to be some ongoing issue between both of them, no matter which parties, no matter which topics or issues are going on. But the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions said on Sunday in a statement that, Quote, states do not regulate interstate commerce. The federal government does. Once again, the California legislature has enacted an extreme and illegal state law attempting to frustrate federal policy. And California's net neutrality law was set to take effect on January 1st, but of course, after the court filing, they're looking to block that to take effect. And the Justice Department warned that internet companies cannot realistically comply with one set of standards in this area for California and another for the rest of the nation, especially when internet communications frequently cross multiple jurisdictions. Steve, I know we've heard that argument many, many times before, and many companies learn how to deal with different laws across states and, of course, international borders. It's just not net neutrality and internet service. It comes down to privacy. It comes down to data collection. So I think, again, that is a weak argument. But again, the government said that California sought to second guess the effects of what the federal government is doing, and they're trying to nullify the federal law, in the state of California. And Steve, it's a frustrating, we've always talked, it's a frustrating state of mind when the only thing that slows these things or hinders them or pushes them forward is when the courts get involved, right? And we knew the state of California wasn't going to be getting very far with this. The Justice Department was gladly going to be stepping in. But one of the important things is that I think, Steve, we stand on the side of is that one of the attorney generals for the state of California said that the FCC and the current administration are ignoring millions of Americans who voice strong support for net neutrality. California, as we know, Steve, home to countless startups, tech giants, and nearly 40 million consumers of those products and those technologies, let alone how many, people do they employ and represent as well. It's all about giving the power to the users and to the internet companies. And right now, the FCC and the administration is more on the side of providing wins for the ISPs, Comcast, AT&T, Verizon. And so, Steve, it's a very tumultuous time, of course, here when it comes to net neutrality. But I think I know where you stand. I know where I stand as far as, I would love to see California come down with some of the strongest policies when it comes to net neutrality to preserve the educational space, a lot of the nonprofits, even the growing tech startups that are here within the state of California. We sort of want a model of saying, ISPs, federal government, you can't control sort of the speeds and access. There shouldn't be these additional paywalls to get things that we need or we want that can make or break a lot of companies. So, but there's a lot going on, Steve, between the federal government and, of course, the state of California, and this thing is not going to calm down anytime soon.
One of the things I find very interesting is that California is probably the one state that sues the federal government the most often for most anything. California is, I believe, correct in what they're attempting to do with their own net neutrality laws, which is basically the ruling of 2015 by the Federal Communications Commission. This is a real dilemma. It really is, because as far as we see it in our eyes, as far as most public individuals see it, as most states, counties, cities see it, the current turnover by the FCC is wrong. It is for big business. It is not for the people. It is about money. It is not about connectivity. It is not about sharing. It's not about cross-platform. It's not about anything but allowing bigger business to do what they want with internet infrastructure, streaming, and costing. And so, okay, now we got this lawsuit going on. So eventually we're going to have 50 of them, because to get the rights back into our pockets, they're going to have to do it. Certainly, I believe that the federal government is going to win with this, and that everybody's going to have to abide by federal legislation. As you mentioned, though, Dave, how do you control this? How do you work all the X, Y's, and Z's about the different platforms or legislations that are going to be out there based on different states because of the complexity and all of them being different? How do you manage or implement something like that? I'm really not sure. So do you have a California internet? No, that's not the way it works. Do you have, a not United States internet? No. Internet is a free and open, for the most part, free and open network for all of us to belong. And thus it should be, and thus it should be regulated. The federal government currently doesn't believe that. And so we're having to go out and, really fight the piecemealing of this. And even if California's suit does go through, Dave, providers can just pull out and say, the heck with you. I'm not supporting your state because we don't agree with that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole thing with net neutrality, FCC, and everything that's happened at the federal level is that I think we all understand, going back to the Obama administration to the current Trump administration, there's always been debate, right, over what is the proper way to legislate, what is the proper way to regulate internet traffic, internet service providers. And we've never really come to any sort of agreement. So sort of this concept that there's going to be a national framework, right, Steve, for the whole internet ecosystem, some sort of framework and system that's going to resolve any and all problems, it's just never going to show up, right? There's always going to be something that is of disagreement. That's where the states have come in and said, listen, we don't want you, i.e. the federal government, the FCC, to give the handful of power to all the power brokers like the Comcast, Verizon's, AT&T's, so that we don't want the power in their hands to dictate the sources for information or the speed in which those websites and that information is loading. They call it, quote, paid prioritization. Essentially, we know it is blocking or throttling traffic or offering fast internet speed fast lanes, to get your content. That's where the states are stepping in and saying, our residents don't agree with what you're doing. Find out a different way to regulate it. Find out a different way, because we know how customer service, how sometimes internet connectivity really suffers when it's just simply in the hands of the power brokers. More importantly, Steve, I know the California state bill that he signed has protections for the consumers in there, ways to file for complaints, ways to contact. With what the FCC presented, there is no real public complaint process that allows me as a user to complain to the federal government and to the FCC about what Comcast is doing to me or what Verizon is doing to me. They're either they're price gouging me or they're slowing down my speeds. What you believe is slowing down. So there's so many different caveats and there's so many nuances going on here. But I'm glad California stepped up, just like many other states within the union, to say, listen, we don't like what you're doing. Sure, go ahead and sue us. Say it's illegal. Say it's extreme. Tell us that we're circumventing and frustrating the federal policies that are outlined. It doesn't matter, because users don't want that sort of that FCC power play, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. We'll follow it. We'll share it, because I know, Steve, you and I are in California. A lot of business happens in California, and it's a big player in the states. And Steve, off the top of my head, I can't think of some of the other states that enacted, and signed executive policies or passed legislation. I don't think the federal government has came at them this strong as they have with the state of California. That may be some history there. It could be, I'm not sure, maybe some of the big players here in the state, it's unique that they're coming so heavy and so fast and so hard at the state of California. It's a constant battle, right, Steve? And the new rules that are going to come down, not many people like. The ISPs like it, the shareholders like it. Every dang person I've ever talked to, I can't think of one person that's ever cared that the net neutrality protections have been pulled.
I think part of the difference, Dave, is that a lot of states have implemented, let's call them some tweaks to what's going on, as where California has come out with an entire California net neutrality legislation. It's massive. It's a big bill. I just want to say one thing about this. Whether it's California, federal government, New Zealand, I don't care. Here's my bottom line that I truly, truly believe, Dave, and it's kind of been the sacred ground of the internet since its invention, is that if I buy a pipe to the internet from whomever the company is, I don't care who it is, I should have the right to do whatever I desire through that connection, whether it's email, video, it doesn't matter. It is not the ISP's authority to modify my connection to appease their dollar. And that's what really, really gets me in the craw. And I appreciate what California is doing in this respect, because people need to stand up to the FCC and say, no, it is wrong. And I should have the right of that pipe to do as I please, not as somebody else wants me to.
Good point, Steve. I think the big takeaway for me is, I see how much my cell phone bill costs me every month. I get a notification on the 4th of every month says, thank you for payment. The amount of this has been taken out. Thanks, AT&T. You can't tell me that these companies aren't making enough money and have enough profits where if they believe that they need to throttle our data, that they need to control and add additional paid offerings, paywalls, and if they want to continue to block traffic to certain sites and requiring payment for that, how shameful of them, right? You guys are making millions upon billions, I'm going to throw that in there, of dollars, where you often neglect your own infrastructure, you neglect reinvesting, and all to the fact of they knew this FCC vote was going. They knew that once, Ajit Pai was in power at the FCC, that he was going to remove those and provide a lot of freedom to the ISPs. And so don't sit there and tell me as an ISP that you are suffering. You're not. Maybe some of the smaller, regional, local, ISPs, I can understand that because that is quite the pull. If you're using gaming, if you're using on-demand video, on-demand music, whatever it is, we're wirelessly connected with all functions that we do now. So that makes sense. But don't give me that crap where Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast are somehow suffering. You had your chance. You knew you're industry leaders. You know where this industry is going. You know how important it is. They understood that, okay, if we can get some few players in our corner, some of the powerful players, we can make this more advantageous and more profitable for us. And I think that's the most disheartening thing, Steve, is that at the center of this all, you and I are not the center of it. It's simply about just protecting as much data as they can and then charging or throttling in order for people to get that. There's plenty of access out there. They're just not either haven't built up their infrastructure or they're leaving a lot of it untapped. And I think that's the problem, Steve, is it's never customer oriented. It's never customer focused. It's just simply profit focused and profit centered. And that is ultimately what is so shameful in this entire thing.
Shameful is a good word. And I totally agree. I guess we don't learn from past history in that when we allow, especially in a legislative way, to force the hand a certain direction, things go awry. And we're at that point now. And, I'm going to stick up for California and the other states that are attempting to be on the backs correctly of business and consumers to fight off the feds when it comes to these big media and ISPs from just gobbling up my world. I just truly don't appreciate it. But Dave, finally, I just want to say something very quickly when it comes to our internet, our devices, our safety, our security, hacking, malware, and all this kind of stuff. I was recently hired on an emergency basis to assist the company in getting their infrastructure back up and running after some hacking and some code insertions and many other respects that has totally shut down and dismantled this company, and they're losing millions of dollars while this is going on. And not with getting into whom or any details as to how this happened, I will say that we are basically reconstructing the entire infrastructure. And as we kind of go through this process, and I hear it frequently with other customers I work with, and primarily from I'm going to say it, from a user perspective, hey, that's IT's issue. That's up to IT. Oh, IT caused this. I want to set a record straight. If you've never worked in IT, you have no right in saying that, and you have no idea what you're talking about. The IT profession are dedicated people that, to the best of their ability, based on knowledge, based on funding, based on a lot of things, do their best to keep their organizations and you safe. And it is not just up to IT to keep these things safe. It is up to every single one of us that are digitally connected to assist in thwarting off the bad stuff. And if you're not, you're as guilty. If you are not reporting a phishing scheme, or if you are surfing bad stuff, especially at work, or if you're as guilty. I'm just going to say you're as guilty as the hacker because you are not providing the resources and the tools to IT to attempt to thwart off these infections or these hacks. And I say this with some sternness, Dave, because it is up to every single one of us in the digital space to assist in the prevention of some of these horrendous things that are going on digitally, with whether it's ransomware or, you name it, that it takes a collective effort to stop this. And I have to throw it out because I get frustrated when I hear many times that it is somebody else's fault or problem, and it's not. It belongs to each one of us.
Exactly, Steve. It's a frustrating state of mind that we're in right now with a lot of, it's IT versus the user. It's a user versus the IT. And I don't know to what degree it's been like that recently, but it seems to be getting a little bit worse, where it's like, oh, you didn't put the proper protections in place to protect me as a user. Well, the IT professional comes around and say, you need to use, safe surfing practices and use solid encrypted, difficult passwords, for access, not like your first name and your last name is your password or something like that. But it just isn't up to IT. It's exactly right. I received an email last week at work that said, that they're going to be changing their password protocols for countywide, and essentially said, these are the 5 or 6 steps you need to make sure that your password includes. And that is going to fall on deaf ears for a lot of people. It's going to fall on some frustrated ears as well. Like, why can't I just use the password I want to? It's got to be complex. I'm not going to be able to remember it. I'll have to write it down, store it. Exactly. We want to make it as difficult as possible for those that are trying to do us the most harm, the hackers, those that are implanting, like Trojans and everything that you mentioned at the top of the segment. It's about protecting ourselves. IT will do their part, but we have to make sure that we are doing the things that we know are right and know that are safe, and putting our own protections in place. Because at the end of the day, Steve, it's not necessarily your information that's getting stolen. It's everybody's information. If you're not using proper security protocols, you put yourself at risk and you put a lot of other people at risk at the same time. And I know sometimes we get in our own bubble. We think, well, my data is the only data that matters. Well, if they came after your friends or your coworkers or your spouses or your boyfriends or whatever, they're going to come after your information too. Then you're going to be sitting back thinking, I should have done more in the past to prevent what's going to happen in the future. So, Steve, I know as far as ITs, I can respect what you have been going through the last week. I respect what my brother Mikey has done in several times and different occasions, where it's just not up to IT. IT will come in, they will fix it. They will suggest and implement protocols. But at the end of the day, this is a two-way street. This is not simply just IT's fault why things happen.
Well, I appreciate your input with that, Dave, because it is very important. And, not just from a personal level, which is important, or a corporate level, but from a worldwide perspective. How do we get a handle on all of this that's going on? We all have to be together to fight it, and not as individuals or as departments, but as a whole. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's collective effort. And that goes for anything that you do. It goes for podcasting here. It goes for if you play on a sports team. It goes for if you're creating video content, whatever it is. It's collective in nature. We can't do things on our own. We can't succeed or fail. We need people to help us along. We need people in our back pockets that are willing to help us. And we have to do the same for IT, just as IT does for us, and just kind of think about that moving forward is, we all need to be diligent. And I think that's all we really want. We need to remember what our data and how much of our data is out there, how valuable it means to us. And I think that can really change our perspective as far as what we do up front to protect ourselves. And of course, help the IT guys a little bit more in the process. Well, Steve, that's going to wrap up episode 418 of The Waves of Tech. I will give you, of course, the final parting words on this episode.
Well, it's good to be back in the saddle. We had a great time off and had International Podcast Day. And, it's just something that is from us to give back to the community and actually to the world. And we appreciate all the support that we get from that. And, based on this show, you and I do it just because we love it. We love tech. We love podcasting. And that's kind of what drives us. It's not about awards. It's not about money. It's about education, and it's about discussion. And I hope if you have things on your mind that you want to discuss with us or agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. That's what this is all about. This is all about the conversation. It's very important that we have those within our life when it comes to topics that we talked about today, whether it's the gaming or the hacking or net neutrality. Keep it on the tip of your tongue and continue to have those discussions.
I appreciate those closing words, Steve. And you enjoy the rest of your week up in the beautiful mountains. Have fun with your emergency response. I'm glad you're able to fit an hour in of podcasting. I know myself and our listeners and the podcast community appreciate that. I am going to enjoy my week in Las Vegas. Got some things planned. Going to be fun. So until next time, Steve, it's good to hear from you. And The Waves of Tech is powered by modernlife.network. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to keep on teching.